YouTube, it's going to be a very bright unboxing today because I know I look like a highlighter. You see a lot of Rolex boxes. These aren't just any Rolexes. There's some special Rolexes in here, along with a few other cool things from my favorite brand, Audemars Piguet, so stay tuned. First up, surprise, surprise, a Rolex. What I'm gonna do, because you guys have seen so many Rolex, but I'm gonna go in terms of sellability today, right? And I'm gonna tell you that this Pepsi GMT is going to be in the top 5 sellers for Rolex today. Jubilee band sells a tiny bit better versus the Oyster. Let's move right along to two-tone 41mm Datejust. They've come down in earth in terms of pricing is concerned. Probably in the top 10 sellers, definitely not in the top 5 seller model. This one is very specific, two-tone Jubilee diamond dial. So let's just say this versus that is not as hot of a seller, but still the 41mm are still a value that people like to go for when they're not looking to spend upwards of 20 grand on a watch, specifically a Rolex. This is gonna take the top spot in terms of sellers. Sells slightly better than its Oyster counterpart. Me personally, every time I pull out a Jubilee, I want a Jubilee. Every time I pull out an Oyster, I want an Oyster. So it's very, very tough for me to tell, and I'm sure some of you guys probably feel the same. I am gonna move right along to, guys, remember how much I like buying up Khanjar stuff, right? So this is obviously going to be a Khanjar Rolex based on the box. And of course, for those of you that are new, Khanjar Rolexes are made specifically for the Sultanate of Oman, who's technically an authorized dealer. And what that does is it puts an engraving in the back of the watch on the modern stuff. The older stuff had the Khanjar on the dial. The way to tell, now you're saying to me, this is laser engraved, so anybody out there with a laser machine and a jeweler could probably engrave that onto the Rolex, but the way you know is based on the signature that's on the newer style cards, and on the older style cards, it's based on, and it actually sells Sultanate of Oman on the older style cards when you used to stamp those cards. I get these from the sources you can imagine, so I have no issues in regards to their authenticity, but you do have to be careful when buying these. Of course, this is one I may consider keeping. Actually, Adrian probably consider keeping because this is Eagles Green, OP 41mm. Let's move right along. Let's do an AP. Too many Rolexes at the moment. Starting with, oh baby, the new. All right, well, maybe not so new anymore, but new-ish. The ceramic Offshore, one of my favorite releases as of a year ago from Audemars Piguet when they took the ceramic line and expanded it onto the Offshore line. It's been saved for obviously the Royal Oaks. The Offshore line is still my favorite line. It's near and dear to my heart. And when they did this in the ceramic, this watch is an absolute knockout. I'm just speechless when they came out with this. I was like, yes. The reason I like it mostly because it still has the pedigree of the older Offshores. If you go on Google and you look at some of the older Offshore, aka the Beasts, you'll notice that the subdial, the chronographs, the way that they are done here, it's done exactly the same way that we're doing it. 1992, we celebrated the 20th anniversary of the Offshore, right? Let's go on to, let's do another AP while we're here. You guys have seen like the market took a dip around the time like these anniversaries came out. Also the anniversary pieces from the Royal Oak collection, the 50th anniversary came out kind of all at the same time. There were a lot on the market. People were like, oh, I don't know. Well, guess what? They have now disappeared. There's not a whole lot of 50th anniversaries out there readily available because most people that bought them, they actually held on to them. And this is probably the most beautiful example, the solid blue dial chrono with the 50th anniversary rotor. This is probably, I'm gonna go with this as my favorite outside the automatic. I do like the chrono. A lot of people like the plain Jane Royal Oaks, the plain Jane Nautiluses and things like that. I like a little bit of a complication in my watch, so I would actually prefer a chronograph versus, let's say, an automatic. And going back to what I was saying, Rootbeer, still in the top 5 sellers. Now, Rootbeer earlier on was probably a watch that was in the top 3, but it has now sort of dropped down in terms of popularity. And again, I'm speaking strictly based on experience of how many of these things will sell, let's say, on a weekly or monthly basis. And I could easily say that it's still sitting at the top 5, but I think it lost the top 3 spot. See, it's not fair to call it popularity because a lot of our sales also depend on availability of how much of this product we actually have. So let's just base it on, you know, last 30 days worth of sales and leave it at that. Here's an interesting OP. And what I like about this particular watch is the dial, right? At a first glance, it's sort of plain gray, sort of blends in, nice chunk of steel, if you will. But the little blue markers that go around the dial and the white sub markers at 3, 6, and 9 just add a little something to this OP. One of the variations I actually like. It's to take the plainest watch that Rolex makes or the cheapest watch that Rolex makes and make it a little bit more interesting. And the funny part is that people talk about this. Oh my God, look at this dial, look at the sub dials, look at this. Rolex has perfected the game of, I'm gonna make the same exact thing over and over, make one tiny little change and people are gonna go ape shit. Another Khanjar Rolex. By the way, you guys wanna see a Khanjar? I think I have one. This is an actual Khanjar. All right, and this was given to me as a gift from my friend from Oman. It actually comes with a pretty fancy belt. This is all silver. It's actually very intricately decorated. It's part of the traditional dress, and there's a belt that comes with this. It's really cool, and you can gut somebody with it. It's actually not sharp, so this is like one of those, I don't know, display pieces. Not for sale. Back to Khanjar Rolexes, and this one happens to be, oh, it's a Coke, and it's an OS. And it does have the Khanjar. Again, this is not quite old enough to have the Khanjar on the dial. You see it on some of the older Datejust, mainly gold pieces. This still has it engraved in the back, still has a sticker on the bracelet. So this sat around for quite some time. People always ask me, you know, buy something, put away for a while. You can find something like this, NOS without the Khanjar, it's great. To find something like that with a Khanjar as a full set is actually a home run as far as I'm concerned. Another Khanjar Rolex in here, and this is the #1 Khanjar Rolex out there, and that would be obviously your Panda Datyona. In terms of popularity, #1 watch. In terms of sales, due to inavailability, and I'm talking about a regular version of this, the Pepsi and the Batman will beat this watch in terms of sales, because again, less availability on this particular product, but in terms of popularity, the Datyona, in my mind, and in a lot of people's minds, is still the most popular watch in the world, single watch in the world, not just Rolex. Is this, well, I can't see. Is this that dial that I can't pronounce? Eisenkiesel? Yes it is. You guys asked me, look, I don't want to go out there and spend tremendous amounts of money on older stone dials and things of that nature, because they've gotten up in price, you know, some over $100,000. Some of the good Stella dials are out there for, you know, $80,000, $90,000. Well, go with something that's modern. If you're going to hold something long term, you cannot go wrong with a stone dial. And this is a beautiful stone dial. If you're somebody out there that's planning to buy something, hold on to it, wear it, and enjoy it, step it up a little bit, try to find something with a fancy dial. And there are plenty of options in the modern collection. Now that the price has come down some, probably a good opportunity to do so if you were eyeing a day. Another Khanjar. I think this whole unboxing is like nothing but Khanjars. And one of the most desirable, the Tiffany OP in a 41mm, is probably the most desirable discontinued Rolex to date. And the reason for that is because the Tiffany craze came and it never ever left. I mean, we made Tiffany t-shirts. I think they sold out like this. So granted, we only made 100 of them, but long story short, again, one of those cases where if you're gonna buy something, hold it long term. Like my wife has a couple of Rolexes that are Khanjar Rolexes. She wanted a particular Rolex, and I knew this was gonna be a long-term hold, passed on to the kids, et cetera, because my wife just doesn't sell anything. She just doesn't. She's a hoarder when it comes to that. I figured, you know what? If you're gonna get this and you're gonna spend the money on this, because this is already trading at stupid amounts of money, it never really came down since it got discontinued, spend a little more, go for the Khanjar, and long-term you'll end up something that's super rare, while, again, it's in the back, so it's not like it's visible. So they called this the other LeBron. This was a limited edition. When they came out with the LeBron Audemars Piguet Offshore limited edition, they then followed up for this, and this was for a boutique, if I'm not mistaken. See the bezel is light gray. You have the strap, you have the rose gold. This was the first time they did this type of color combination, because majority of two-tone, or I should say gold watches with like ceramic bezels, they were black and rose predominantly. The dial could have been black, the dial could have been white, but predominantly it was that. Here they experimented with colors. Same color scheme they did on a LeBron James. And when that was a success, and LeBron James limited edition Offshore is a huge success, it still trades at double its retail value. One of the most popular Offshores out there for people to keep, because it has two values behind it. Not only is it an Audemars Piguet, not only is it a limited edition Offshore, it is also a LeBron James Offshore, arguably one of the greatest basketball players that ever played the game. Of course, I pick Jordan. Marco will argue otherwise, but we're not going to get into that argument because we don't have that kind of time. Maybe this is special. It's a Breitling emergency, and I guess they went a little overzealous on the stamp. They decided to stamp this particular case twice. I don't know why. And wow, this is terms and conditions that you have to actually sign when it comes to these watches. And this is one of them. There's an original invoice in here. I wonder what this watch originally sold for. Is this? No, this is not the invoice. This is the condition of sales. This was the original guy that bought it. And it was actually sold to a pilot, and rightfully so. So this gentleman, first name Al, it says, there's an occupation here, it says pilot. It was sold in 1983. And the reason they do all this stuff is because the emergency beacon, okay, that you use this to charge it, etc., etc. The emergency beacon on this watch, if this is pulled out, it will send out an international SOS signal, and the cavalry will come and get you. And if it's not a real emergency, they will charge you upwards of, I think, $10,000 or $15,000 for a false alarm, because that's what this thing does. And a lot of pilots have bought these watches, and this one is, because it's old enough, it does still have the Khanjar on the dial. Yes, links. It comes with a VHS tape. So it comes with a full-blown instructional video on VHS. I wonder if we can find this footage somewhere, like digitally, because I don't know about you, I threw my VCR out. Anyway, guys, so yeah, there you have it. And you have a nifty little case that you can take on an airplane with you if you're a pilot. I'm not a pilot. In fact, I'm a nervous flyer, so I can never be a pilot. So YouTube, thank you so much for tuning in. I appreciate you sticking around. This happened to be a Khanjar event. I didn't even know we got so many Khanjar Rolexes along with this Breitling emergency. I'm not gonna take this with me on a plane because I will never be a pilot because I'm a nervous flyer, but like, comment, share, subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.